What happens when a street kid warns a billionaire, "Your wife cut the brakes"? A karmic twist. What if a street child told you someone was trying to kill you? Would you believe him? That morning, the sun hadn't yet risen. The city's towering skyscrapers were still drowning in pale shadows. Neon lights flickered across the damp pavement, reflecting like oil stains melancholic blemishes on the prideful face of the metropolis. People began to pour onto the streets like swarms of ants, hurried, breathless, jostling through clouds of exhaust fumes. Beneath a subway entrance, nestled between garbage and the blaring horns above, a small boy curled up beside a torn piece of cardboard. His hair was matted, his thin clothes caked in dust, his cracked feet bleeding in places. That was Mateo, 10 years old, invisible to the world. He didn't cry. He hadn't for a long time. His heart had been worn down by hunger and cruelty until it no longer had the strength to shed tears. All that remained was a survival instinct, a flickering ember in his small chest. Mateo was used to being unseen. People walked past him like stepping over a puddle. No one stopped. No one asked. No one remembered that a soul was trembling in the heart of this glamorous city. But that day fate led him to a darker corner of the world. A place where shadows didn't just lurk in alleys, but behind luxury cars, tailored suits, and well-timed smiles. Mateo was rummaging through a trash bin behind a fancy cafe when he heard whispers coming from a nearby alley. His instincts kicked in. Not out of curiosity, but because street kids like him needed to know who was talking, what they were doing, and whether there might be a few coins to earn. But no, there was no money. No food. Just two shadowy figures under a flickering billboard and a few words that pierced Mateo's heart like needles. The brakes have already been cut. Once he drives today, it's over. She doesn't want him to survive the night. Mateo froze. His heart stopped. He'd never seen death, but he knew it sent cold, grim, and soaked in hopelessness. Those words weren't a joke. This wasn't a movie. It was real. They were plotting a murder. For a few breathless moments, Mateo stood at a crossroads, slip away like a shadow as he'd always done, or step closer, listen further, and carry a secret heavier than his own life. And then, a name rang out. Clear. Heavy. Saúl Montenegro. It hit like thunder through the mist. Who in this city hadn't heard that name? Saúl, the head of a vast financial empire, splashed across newspapers for billion-dollar deals and grand charity donations. A man who seemed to have it all: power, money, fame, and enemies. Mateo knew he couldn't walk away. Even as a child, he understood one thing: if he stayed silent today, then tomorrow Saúl Montenegro would die. His blood would stain the very street Mateo begged on each morning. And he would become another silent accomplice, like everyone else who walked past him without a word. Mateo stepped back, heart pounding like war drums, head spinning. In his mind was the image of a man he'd never met, stepping into a luxury car, smiling confidently, unaware that each step brought him closer to death. He had to do something. Now. Before it was too late. The street boy shook not from the cold, but from fear. But there was a fire, small but burning, in his eyes. A fire called courage. He pulled his ragged shirt tighter and ran, leaving behind the conspirators laughing in the shadows. He had no plan, no idea if anyone would believe a street kid. But he knew this: silence kills more people than knives. And today Mateo, the invisible boy, would speak. Saúl Montenegro. That name echoed in Mateo's head like a never-ending drumbeat. Though he'd only heard it once, it carried a terrifying weight, like the entire adult world pressing down on his tiny shoulders. Mateo ran. Bare feet slapped against the icy pavement as he dodged suspicious glances and the endless wail of traffic. He had no map. No clue what Saúl Montenegro even looked like. All he knew was this: if he didn't find him before sunset, he would die. A street kid searching for a billionaire? Could anything sound more absurd? But Mateo didn't stop. Something primal burned inside him. The truth had to be told whether or not anyone listened. He stopped at a newsstand. On the front page of La Voz del Capital was a man in a dark suit, sunglasses on, shaking hands with a politician at a grand summit. "Who is this?" Mateo asked the grumpy, bald newspaper vendor. "You don't know? That's Montenegro. Saúl Montenegro. Donated $3 million to charity just yesterday," the man scoffed. "What, you think you can take the paper without paying?" Mateo shook his head. I just need to know where he is." The man gave him a sharp glare. "Where?" "Probably sitting in some five-star hotel counting money. And you? You're here breathing up my air." Mateo mumbled a thanks and walked away. He didn't get an exact location, but at least now he had a face. That face was seared into his memory like a target in a storm. He kept asking vendors, guards near office buildings. Most chewed him off, others laughed. Some cursed at him. "Quit pretending you're in a movie, kid. You think you're a hero? A street rat trying to save a billionaire?" It was laughable. But Mateo didn't laugh. By noon, he'd snuck into the lobby of a grand hotel. Everything inside gleamed like gold. Marble floors, chandeliers like upside-down castles, the air thick with expensive perfume. Every step he took was followed by sneering stares. "Get out of here now," a security guard barked when he spotted Mateo near a stairwell. Mateo was about to run when a voice drifted from the elevator. "Prep the car. Mr. Montenegro wants to drive himself to the gala tonight. Wants to show the media how humble he is." Mateo froze. His heart slammed against his ribs. Gala. Car. Tonight. This was it. If Montenegro got into that car with sabotaged brakes, nothing would save him. Mateo dashed out before he was caught, squeezing through alleys, trying to remember the event's address. He had no invitation. No connections. But he had the most important thing, the truth and a faint intuition that if he didn't find Montenegro, they'd both lose something eternal tonight. Mateo didn't know that just a few buildings away, two men were finishing their work. One wiped his greasy hands, eyeing the polished sports car in the garage. "He's really driving tonight?" one asked. "Yeah." His wife made sure of it, the other smirked. "Now we just wait for the news tomorrow morning." They didn't know a 10-year-old child, barefoot and starving, was running with every ounce of life in him to stop death from arriving on time. And in the quietest battles, sometimes, the victor doesn't need a gun. Mateo walked aimlessly through the city like a shadow, nameless, forgotten, without a past. He couldn't remember the last time someone had called him son, or what it felt like to be pulled into an embrace and gently told, "Don't be afraid." All he had were bare feet on cold pavement, and a heart pounding so fast it nearly choked him. The truth sat heavy in his chest like a stone. He had overheard a murder plot. Not some random back alley crime, but an attempt to kill Saúl Montenegro, one of the most powerful men in the city. Mateo kept asking himself, why? Why would someone like Montenegro, who had everything, be marked for death? And more disturbing was the tone in which those men had mentioned her, with both reverence and venom. "She wants this done tonight. Who was she? In a sidewalk diner near the Central Plaza, Mateo crouched behind a signboard, straining to catch snippets of the server's conversation. Then came a gust of fragile opportunity, barely a whisper, but heavy with meaning. Word is, Montenegro's attending the biggest charity gala of the year tonight. They say he's driving himself, trying to look relatable to the press. Another worker chimed in. His wife Victoria, she's been weirdly quiet lately. Used to show up everywhere with him. Now, vanished. That name. Victoria. Elegant as aged wine and maybe just as poisonous. Mateo blinked. Could she be the woman the killers mentioned? Could Victoria, Montenegro's wife, be the one behind the plot? The thought gave him chills. He didn't know much about adult betrayal, but he understood one thing: when someone closest to you wants you dead, it's a betrayal far more lethal than a bullet. Outside, rain began to fall. Soft drops like tiny warnings from the sky. But Mateo didn't care. He had only one mission: reach Saul before it was too late. He made his way back toward the hotel where Montenegro was staying. Cold wind whipped through the tears in his shirt. Rain soaked into the cracked skin of his heels. But Mateo didn't stop. He ducked behind a flower cart and watched staff in sharp suits load luggage and prep vehicles. Then he overheard Gold. The limousine rolls at 6:30. He's driving himself. Clean the windshield. And remember, no one touches the control systems. Mateo's heart nearly exploded. 6:30. He glanced at a nearby clock tower. Less than an hour left. What could he possibly do? A child, trying to reach a heavily guarded mogul? Surrounded by elite security trained to suspect every glance. Mateo scanned the area. His eyes locked on the line of cars parked along the curb, the path Montenegro's convoy would take. A reckless idea bloomed in his mind. Maybe stupid. Maybe suicidal. But it might be his only shot. He would wait. Right where Montenegro would pass. As soon as that door opened, he'd charge in, scream everything he knew. If they grabbed him, pushed him, dragged him away, he'd scream louder. He wouldn't let silence kill a man. This wasn't about the rich or the poor anymore. It wasn't Saúl Montenegro versus Mateo the homeless boy. This was a battle between truth and lies. Life and death. And Mateo, who had nothing left to lose, was the only one with the courage to say what no one wanted to hear. So he stood there, under the rain, fists clenched, eyes locked on the glowing hotel. Because he knew. If he didn't speak now, a man would die tonight. And the world would turn its back, pretending a boy named Mateo never tried to stop it. Dusk settled. Rain slicked the cobbled sidewalks. Mateo had stood there for more than half an hour, soaked to the bone. His small hands gripped the edge of his tattered coat, his eyes fixed on the hotel's main entrance, where Saúl Montenegro, a man he had never met, could appear at any moment. The wealthy began to arrive. Luxury cars lined the street, drivers opening doors, camera flashes lighting up the dusk. Elegant dresses and tuxedos brushed past the little boy like ghosts of a different world. No one noticed Mateo. Just another trembling, dirty child swallowed by a world polished to perfection. But Mateo was ready. Afraid. Yes. But more afraid of seeing an innocent man die. A child like him couldn't save the world. But tonight, maybe saving one man was enough. The hotel's revolving door turned. An entourage stepped out, surrounding a central figure. Black suit. Crisp white shirt. Sunglasses that mirrored the world. His presence cleared a path. Every step radiated power. Mateo knew instantly. That was Saúl Montenegro. No time to think. No hesitation. Only instinct. Mateo sprinted toward the limousine. "Stop him," guards shouted. Two large men lunged. They grabbed him like he was a live explosive. "No. Don't drive. They cut the brakes. They want to kill you." Mateo screamed, his voice slicing through the air like a shattered bell. Time froze. Saúl paused. One hand on the limo door. He turned, sunglasses reflecting the child being dragged across the wet ground, soaked, desperate, and real. "What did that boy say?" Saúl asked, voice thunderous under the rain. "Sorry, sir. Just a homeless kid. Probably delusional," a guard explained. But Saúl did something no one expected. He raised his hand. "Let him speak," he ordered. They released Mateo. He collapsed, gasping. Struggled to stand, dizzy from cold, hunger, and fear. But in Saúl Montenegro's eyes, no longer cold, there was something new. Doubt. Caution. A flicker of belief. Mateo took a breath, lips trembling. I heard them. Two men, in a dark alley. They were talking about this car, about cutting the brakes, and they said," his voice broke, "she doesn't want you to live through the night." A chill ran down Saul's spine. He asked quietly. Mateo nodded. "They said she hired them. A powerful, rich woman. I don't know her name. But they want you dead." The guards exchanged uneasy looks. Saúl didn't speak right away. He slowly removed his sunglasses, revealing eyes hardened by years of power. But in that moment, something cracked inside them. Victoria. His wife had insisted he drive himself tonight. Said it would score points with the media as a humble gesture. He hadn't thought much of it. But now, the puzzle pieces were snapping into place. "Check the car." Immediately, Saúl ordered, his voice low but enough to launch his team into motion. Technicians swarmed the vehicle. Mateo stood in the corner, trembling. What if they dismissed it all? What if they laughed him off? Minutes later, one technician looked up, face pale. "Mr. Montenegro, the car's been tampered with. Brake system cut, done professionally." Silence fell. No more traffic. No more camera flashes. Only the horrifying truth. The billionaire had narrowly escaped death because of a child no one saw. Mateo stood there, soaked and shaking, fists clenched as if holding his heart together. And in that moment, Saúl Montenegro looked at him. Not as a billionaire looks at a beggar, but as a man who knew he had just been saved. In the stillness of the parking lot, the air felt sliced by the words just spoken. Saúl stood there, his eyes fixed on the trembling boy before him. His bodyguards remained confused, unsure of what had just unfolded. It was all too sudden, too unreal. A homeless street boy had just saved his life. And in that moment, Saúl Montenegro, a man who once believed himself untouchable, suddenly realized he was no longer strong enough to protect himself. He looked at the boy again. Mateo, the one who had just revealed a terrifying truth, stood there with eyes full of uncertainty and fear, but also with something rare: sincerity, resilience. It was the gaze of someone who had seen too much cruelty, yet refused to give up on doing what's right. "Thank you," Saúl said, voice hoarse from the weight of shock. He didn't know what else to say. A thank you seemed far too small for the depth of gratitude in his chest. Mateo simply nodded. He said nothing more. He was tired, exhausted, and his legs could barely hold him up. Rain clung to his shoulders like unseen tears. He could only stand there, panting, hoping this nightmare had truly ended. But deep down, he knew it hadn't. Saul studied him, still unsettled. He realized that Mateo wasn't just some lucky witness, he was the only one who had seen the truth in a city shrouded in illusion. Yet now, that name Victoria, his proud, powerful wife, loomed in his mind, making every next step dangerous. "What do I do with you?" Saul suddenly asked, his voice low, uncertain. The question startled Mateo. He looked at Saul, still wary not just of the man, but of this entire unfamiliar world where everything had value except truth and conscience. Saul held his gaze, then signaled a guard. "Bring him inside the car. Check on him. Get him somewhere safe." Before Mateo could fully grasp what was happening, a large hand gripped his arm and pulled him toward the vehicle. He flinched but didn't resist. After all he'd witnessed, he no longer had the energy to fight. He had done his part. Whatever happened next, at least he wouldn't live with the guilt of having said nothing. Inside Saul's luxury limousine, the world outside became a blur of star-like lights. Mateo sat quietly in the back, eyes closed, trying to relax his aching body. He wondered, was what I did enough? Did I truly save him? Or would the world return him to the same street, invisible, unheard? Then came a voice from the front seat, soft, cutting through the heavy silence. "Do you know why I believed you?" Saul asked. Mateo didn't answer. He turned, meeting Saul's eyes in the rearview mirror. This time, the man's gaze wasn't cold. It was layered, wrestling with thoughts he couldn't easily express. Saul sighed, then said, "It's not because you're a child. It's because when you spoke I heard truth. And you're not a liar." Mateo didn't know why, but those words hit him deeper than any praise. For the first time, he felt seen. Respected. Not just a child from the gutter, but someone who mattered. In that fleeting moment, the barrier between billionaire and beggar vanished. They were simply two people who recognized truth, no matter who spoke it. "Thank you for saving me," Saul added. This time, it wasn't surprise speaking. It was genuine. Mateo nodded again. He didn't need more words. He had done the only thing he could. The right thing. But now, again, he felt something rising in him. He couldn't give up. This truth, this moment might be the beginning of something greater. Or it might be the end of his story. He didn't know. But he held on to hope. Mateo sat silently in the luxurious limousine, the outside world feeling like a distant dream. He was in a car that hours ago, he thought only existed in the lives of the wealthy and powerful. And now he, a homeless boy, was sitting beside one of the most powerful men in the city. A man he had saved, with nothing more than a warning. His heart felt hollow. Waves of emotion crashed inside him. Joy. Fear. And a quiet question he couldn't quite form. Could I really change anything? The car passed under neon lights, the world moving in slow motion. Everything outside was too fast, too distant. Mateo wasn't used to this world, its comfort, its shine. He was used to the chill of the sidewalk, the smell of trash, the averted eyes of strangers. Saul, sitting across from him, said nothing more. But Mateo could feel the shift. The man was lost in thought. So Mateo stayed quiet. He knew no question could help right now. Then, after a long silence, Saul spoke again, his voice deep, thoughtful. "Mateo, You saved my life. I won't forget that. But I have to ask. Why did you do it? You don't know me. Why risk your life for a stranger? Mateo didn't answer right away. He looked out the window, the city streets painting themselves like a watercolor. His heart beat hard, not from fear, but from something strange. Freedom. He drew in a deep breath and answered, softly but firmly. I didn't think much. Everyone's always pushing to survive. But no one stops to say what needs to be said. I heard them talking about your death. And I couldn't just walk away. I'm not a hero. But I believe if you know something that can save someone, you have to say it. Saul looked at him not with pity, nor with superiority, but with something deeper. Understanding. Weren't you afraid? He asked. I was, Mateo replied. But if I did nothing, I wouldn't be able to live with myself. Saul went quiet, eyes narrowing, looking far away. He had believed power, wealth, and connections would always protect him. Now he realized only truth had saved his life. They both sat in silence as the car continued gliding through the glowing streets. Then, finally, Saul spoke again, voice low but certain. Mateo, I think we need to talk more. You see, I've lived too long in a world full of lies. But what you did, it reminded me. Not everything can be solved with money or influence. He paused, then looked directly at Mateo. I think you have a place in this world, Mateo. You're not invisible. You're worth more than anything I've ever owned. Mateo didn't reply. He just felt something warm inside. Like for the first time in his life, he wasn't just a shadow. He was part of something bigger. He didn't need more than that. That feeling was enough. The car rolled through neon-lit streets. And even though he didn't know where life would take him next, Mateo had seen a flicker of hope in the dark. And it had all begun with truth spoken by a child no one wanted to hear. The warmth Mateo had felt inside the luxury car now seemed like a fleeting moment between crashing waves. The world around him was still a swirl of light and shadow, reminding him that he didn't belong here. Even though he had saved Saúl Montenegro, the powerful man behind a financial empire, Mateo knew this world wasn't going to change just because of one act of courage. The drive continued for another half hour before the car finally stopped in front of a high-rise building. This wasn't a hotel or a place Mateo had seen before. It was something else, elegant, glowing with light, draped in silent opulence. The car door opened. Saul stepped out first, then turned to Mateo. Come with me, Saul said, his voice no longer cold but touched with something almost kind. Mateo stepped out of the car. As his feet hit the ground, a familiar unease crept up inside him. He never imagined he'd walk into a place like this, let alone be welcomed as a guest. Flanked by two large bodyguards, Mateo followed Saul inside. The first thing he felt was awe. Every surface gleamed with curated perfection, every detail in its place. It was like walking into another world. Saul led him through a long hallway into a spacious office filled with modern art, soft chandelier light, and a grand desk at its center. Have a seat, Saul said, gesturing to the large sofa with a look gentler than Mateo had ever seen. We need to talk. Mateo sat down, his heart unsettled. He didn't know what Saul would say, but he knew, deep down, that whatever came next would change his life. Saul sat across from him, eyes shining with the weight of deep consideration. After a long pause, he finally spoke. I think you understand that what happened today wasn't some random coincidence. You saved my life and that can't be brushed aside. He paused, making sure Mateo was absorbing the full gravity of his words. But I want to know, why did you do it? Why was it you, a child living on the streets, who chose to step forward when no one else did? Mateo looked into his eyes, his throat tight. He had asked himself that same question over and over during the car ride. But the answer still wasn't easy. I just did what I had to do, he finally replied, voice steady. If I didn't speak up, someone would have died. And if I did nothing, I wouldn't be able to live with my own conscience. Saul nodded slowly, accepting the answer, his eyes reflecting a deeper thought. Conscience, yes. He chuckled softly, but without joy. You know, when you have everything, you tend to forget the simplest things. You forget what really matters: truth, honesty, trust. He stood and walked to the large window. You're a child from the streets, Mateo. But you haven't lost what I gave up long ago. You still know what it means to do the right thing. Mateo didn't speak. He understood that this wasn't praise, it was an admission. An acknowledgement that in Saul's world of wealth and deception, values like truth and conscience had been buried under layers of power. Saul turned back, exhaled deeply. But what I still don't understand is, why did you feel responsible for saving a man you didn't even know? Mateo hesitated, then replied. Because I couldn't just watch someone die and do nothing, no matter who they are. I can't change the world. But maybe I can change one person. Saul stood frozen, struck by the words. He didn't respond, but something behind his eyes shifted. Something deep and long forgotten. After a while, Saul picked up his phone and made a brief call. When he hung up, he turned back to Mateo. Do you want to change your life? He asked, voice serious. Mateo blinked, startled. Before he could respond, Saul continued. You can go to school. You can live somewhere safe. You can have everything you need, a real chance to start over. Mateo stared at him, eyes bright with disbelief. I don't understand, he said. What are you saying? It can't be that easy. I'm just a kid with nothing. No one. Saul stepped closer, his voice sincere, more human than ever. That's exactly why I want to help you. You saved my life, Mateo. Now, I'm going to help you. Mateo sat silently, barely able to comprehend what he just heard. Every word from Saúl Montenegro felt like a breeze through his soul. He was used to having nothing, used to hunger, cold, and the indifference of strangers. But today, everything had changed. You can go to school. You can start over. I'll help you, Mateo, Saul repeated like he wanted to make sure the boy believed it. Doubt rose in Mateo's heart. Could this be real? Or just another lie like the empty promises rich people whispered as they passed him by? But in Saul's eyes, Mateo saw something different. Sincerity. Not pity. Not guilt. But truth. This was a real chance, something he'd never dared dream of. He sat in silence, processing everything. He didn't know what to do with the opportunity. But he knew one thing. If he didn't try, he'd lose everything anyway. What would I even do with my life, if I had that chance? Mateo asked softly, voice shaking with emotion. Saul's gaze softened. You'll have everything you need. A home, a school, a future. But most importantly, you'll have freedom. The freedom to do what's right. To build your own life, not be shaped by your past or anyone else. Mateo looked into his eyes, and for the first time in his life, he believed in something outside himself. He'd lived too long with nothing. No one had ever seen him. But now someone believed in him. I don't know what to say, Mateo whispered, eyes glistening. I never thought I could live like that. Saul smiled a rare, warm smile. Don't worry. That's why I'm here. I've lived a life of power and calculation. But I've lost sight of the basic things. Things you still have, Mateo. We'll walk this path together. And I promise you'll never have to live in the shadows again. Saul stood, walked to the desk, and pulled out a large envelope. He placed it in front of Mateo. These are the documents you'll need to begin again. A new chance. A new life. If you're ready, I can help you find a new family. A place to study. And a place to finally belong. Mateo looked down at the envelope. His heart overflowed. This wasn't just a second chance. It was a promise. A promise that he didn't have to be forgotten. He picked up the envelope slowly, still unsure if he was dreaming. But he knew one thing. This was the beginning. I'll do everything I can to earn this chance, Mateo said, his voice stronger than ever. Saul looked at him with steady eyes. I believe in you. And remember, this life won't be easy. But if you keep your conscience clear and never stop trying, you'll go far. Never lose what you already have inside you. That's what matters most. Mateo stood, the envelope clutched in his hands. The fear was still there. But now, so was hope. This wasn't the end. It was a beginning. He looked at Saul one last time. No longer with doubt in his eyes, but with quiet resolve. He knew he had done the right thing. And even though the future was uncertain, at least he had someone beside him now. Someone who believed. Thank you, Mateo said, voice trembling. I won't let you down. Saul smiled. I know, Mateo. I know. Mateo stepped out of the building, the envelope clutched tightly in his hands. Inside it were documents, important ones. Things he never imagined he'd possess. It felt like a great door had just opened before him, leading into an entirely different world. A world with no shards of poverty, no wounds of loneliness, and none of the cold stares he had grown used to. He walked along the sidewalk, the store lights reflecting off the wet pavement. It was a night like any other in this city, but tonight felt different. For the first time, Mateo felt like he was part of this world. He still couldn't fully believe everything that had happened, but something inside him had changed. As he passed by luxury stores and bustling streets, the feeling of being left behind no longer haunted him. It was as if something unseen was pulling him forward. A force he couldn't ignore. He didn't know where he was going exactly. But he knew this time, he had a chance. A chance to change his life. When he reached a nearby park, he sat on a bench and opened the envelope. The documents inside might seem ordinary to others, but to him they were a turning point. Names. Addresses. Information. Everything he needed to begin a new life. Saul hadn't made empty promises. But could Mateo really do it? Did he have the strength to change everything? He bit his lip, fighting the emotion building inside. He had lived in a world without dreams, without hope, just survival. But now, he had a chance not just to live, but to live with purpose. He couldn't let that go. He wiped his face, trying to ease the tightness in his chest. This new world, he wasn't ready. But he had no other choice. He had to move forward. That night, Mateo found a bed in a small hostel. His body was exhausted from the long day. But his mind refused to rest. He wondered, could this really be as simple as Saul had said? Could a man like him truly want to help a child like me? Or was it all just a game? A rich man's act of redemption? He didn't know. But one thing was certain. He couldn't go back. Not to the street. Not to the life where no one looked at him. Not to the world that never gave him a chance. He had a chance now. And he had to take it. The next morning, Mateo set out for the place Saul had instructed him to go. A place to learn, a place to begin again. His steps were slow, uncertain. But they were steps forward away from the dark. That weekend, Saul called Mateo. For the first time in years, Saul felt something shift inside himself. He wasn't just changing the life of a child, he was changing his own. After decades behind the armor of wealth, power, and perfection, he was beginning to see that life wasn't about what you own, but what you give. What you're willing to help build in someone else. Mateo, Saul said over the phone. I know you can do this. But I also know it won't be easy. You'll face challenges not just from the world, but from inside yourself. You'll battle fears and doubts that have lived with you for years. I understand, Mr. Montenegro, Mateo replied. I won't give up. Good. You won't give up and neither will I. Together, we're going to change your life. And who knows, maybe we'll change the world. Mateo fell silent, letting Saul's words settle. He didn't know exactly what the future would bring. But for the first time he believed in himself. He had a chance. And now, he was ready to take the first step. Thank you, Saul. I'll do everything I can. The next morning, Mateo stepped out of his small room. Sunlight poured through the window cracks, warming the cold space he once called shelter. Just like Saul had promised, he had a new start. But would he have the strength to face what this new life required? Could he really change? He knew he'd have to face the past. The street. The pain. The rejection. He couldn't erase it. But he could begin from here, from now. He walked through the city, feeling the warmth of the morning sun. Today wasn't just another day to survive. It was a day to begin something meaningful. When he reached the place Saul had described, he saw a large modern building, like the ones he'd only seen in movies or luxury ads. But this time he wasn't an outsider peeking in. He was part of it now. As he stepped inside, he felt overwhelmed. Bright lights. Courteous staff. Clean air. A world he never thought he'd enter. Saul was waiting in a small room. When Mateo walked in, Saul stood, his expression welcoming, no longer distant. Welcome, Mateo. Today is the first day of a new journey. Saul said, his voice calm, full of meaning. Mateo nodded, trying not to feel overwhelmed. I know it won't be easy, he said. But I'll try. Saul gestured toward a chair across from him. Let's start with something simple. What do you think you need most to change your life? Mateo paused. His life had never had structure. It had been a battle for survival, food, shelter, safety. But now, what did he need to rebuild? I think I need to learn. To stand on my own. To face life. His voice was soft but resolute. Saul smiled and nodded. Exactly. Learning is your foundation. But there's one more thing, Mateo. You have to face your past. A chill ran down Mateo's spine. His past, the years of sleeping in alleys. The wounds that never healed. I don't know how to face it, he whispered. Saul paused. The past is a part of us. It's not something to erase, it's something to learn from. If you can accept it, not let it control you, you'll be free. The words felt like a candle in the dark. Mateo didn't know if he could do it. But he knew this much. If he didn't try, he'd never know. I'll try, Mateo said firmly. I won't let the past hold me down. Saul nodded. Then we begin today. The first step is learning to face yourself. Don't let those memories block your future. This chance you have, it's rare. Don't waste it. Mateo looked at him no longer with doubt. His eyes now carried hope. He still didn't know what the future held. But for the first time, he could see the path. The next day, Mateo began a new chapter in his life. He stood at the edge of a long road, unable to see everything ahead. But for once, he had a purpose. The school wasn't like any he'd imagined. It wasn't full of laughter and playgrounds. But purpose and structure. And that was what Mateo needed. Saul had prepared everything. Mateo now studied in a place he never dared to dream of. But he knew. To change his life, he'd have to fight. Against his fears. His doubts. His past. On his first day, Mateo felt out of place. The other students were well dressed, confident, privileged. He wasn't the only one who was different. But he was the only one who came from nothing. That night, back in his room, Mateo sat alone by the window, watching the city pulse with life. The night looked the same, but this time, he saw it from a new angle. Can I really do this? He whispered, staring at his hands. Hands that once searched for food scraps, now holding a future. Just then, his phone rang. It was Saul. Mateo wasn't surprised. Saul never missed a moment to encourage him. Mateo, Saul said. I know today wasn't easy. But this is just the first step. Remember, what you do today shapes your tomorrow. I understand, Mr. Montenegro. But sometimes, I feel like I don't belong here. Everyone around me has so much. And I don't know if I can catch up. There was a pause. Then Saul's voice returned, gentle, warm. Mateo, none of us are born knowing everything. The others may have had chances before you. But you have something they don't. Sincerity. And the strength to fight for what you believe in. That's what matters most. Mateo felt the truth in those words. He didn't need to become someone else. He just needed to be himself. And keep fighting. I'll try, Mr. Saul, Mateo said, voice steady. I won't give up. Saul smiled through the line. Good. This journey won't be easy. But every step you take matters. And I believe in you. After the call, Mateo sat quietly, realizing that his world had truly changed. He was no longer alone. Someone believed in him. And that belief was powerful beyond words. The next morning, as Mateo walked into class, he no longer felt like a stranger. He had started to change, and that change wasn't just on the outside. It was in how he saw himself. He began making friends, no longer hesitating or hiding. He now knew where to begin, and the first step was to face who he used to be with confidence. Day by day, Mateo continued to study. He learned new things, and although there were times when he felt exhausted, he didn't stop. Each time he looked back, he realized he was getting one step closer to becoming the person he had always dreamed of being. Someone who could stand tall, and never go back to the life he left behind. Time passed, and Mateo began to feel a shift in his life. Those first days had been hard, but he was starting to adjust. He went to school every day, studied hard, and made his first real friends. Though worries still lingered, he felt like he was finally stepping out of the darkness, discovering a new light. Then one morning, on his way to class, something unexpected happened. His phone rang. It was Saul, and his voice was urgent. "Mateo, I need to see you right away. Something big is about to happen." Saul didn't explain further. But that tone, tense and sharp, told Mateo this wasn't ordinary. Anxiety surged through his chest. He didn't know what was going on, but he knew one thing. When Saul called like that, it meant trouble. He rushed to meet him, heart pounding. When he arrived, Saul was waiting in a quiet room, his face serious. Not like before. "What's going on, Saul?" Mateo asked, voice trembling slightly. Saul turned to him, his eyes filled with concern but also resolve. "Mateo, I know you've been doing great. But I need you to understand something. The road to success is never easy. And today you'll face your greatest challenge yet." Mateo frowned, confused. "You thought you escaped your past, didn't you?" Saul continued. "But the past doesn't always stay buried. Someone from your past has come back." "Who?" Mateo asked, the fear rising in his chest. "Someone you never wanted to see again," Saul replied, his voice dropping low. "You'll have to face him. And I want you to be prepared, because he won't let you live in peace." Mateo sank into a chair, anxiety swirling within him. He hadn't prepared for this, not now. He had fought so hard to build a new life, and now it was being threatened. "What should I do?" he asked, voice unsteady. Saul's eyes softened, but remained serious. "You need to confront him. I'll be with you. But this won't be easy. He won't back down." Mateo nodded, even as fear gripped him. Despite all his progress, he still didn't feel ready for what life kept throwing at him. "I'll do what I have to," Mateo said, unsure, but determined. Saul placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "Good. Be strong. This may be a turning point in your life." That afternoon, Saul brought Mateo to a luxurious villa, unlike any place Mateo had ever entered. The mansion was massive, impeccably elegant. But Mateo sensed something was off. A hidden darkness seemed to linger. As they walked inside, Mateo felt as though he had stepped into another world. A place of order, beauty, and something unsettling beneath the surface. And then he saw him. The man standing in the living room. Mateo recognized him instantly. A ghost from his past. Not just a shadow, but someone he had once worked for. Someone he had avoided for years. Now, that man stood before him. Cold gaze. Mocking smile. "Welcome back, Mateo," the man said, voice sharp and smug. "Never thought I'd see you here." Mateo froze. His heart clenched. It wasn't over, not yet. The man's presence sent a chill through Mateo's spine. He had tried so hard to forget this part of his life. "Didn't expect to see you in a place like this," the man said, sneering. "You've changed a bit, but some things never change. You're still that poor little orphan I used to know." Mateo said nothing. But inside, something was rising. Anger. He was tired of being pulled back. He had fought too hard to escape this darkness. Saul stood beside him and gave a small nod and unspoken encouragement. "Don't worry, Mateo. I'm here. We'll face this together." The man wasn't just anyone. He was one of the people who had dragged Mateo into the streets, who had made his life hell. And now he was back with an agenda. "So," the man said, eyes gleaming. "Still pretending to be the good guy, huh? But everything in this world has a price. Did you really think you could escape me? The past doesn't leave, Mateo. It follows you." Mateo swallowed hard, chest tight with emotion. He remembered every cruelty every time this man had used him like a puppet. But now, he was different. He had learned to stand. He turned to Saul, whose firm gaze met his. "Mateo, don't let him control you. You're not weak anymore. You decide who you become." Saul's words snapped something awake. Mateo took a deep breath and faced the man. "You're wrong," Mateo said, his voice no longer shaking. "I'm not the kid you used to control. I've changed. And no one drags me back again." The man's smirk twitched. Anger flickered in his eyes. "You think you've won, street rat? Everything you have you owe to me. You're nothing without me." He shrugged, arrogant as ever. But his words no longer had power. Mateo wasn't alone anymore. Saul stepped forward, facing the man directly. "Your games are over. Mateo isn't your puppet anymore. And I won't let you harm him again." The man scoffed. "You? A rich man trying to rescue a street kid? Let's see how far your charity really goes." Saul didn't flinch. He turned to Mateo. "This is your moment. You choose. And I know you'll choose right." Mateo felt strength rise within him. He didn't need to be afraid anymore. He wasn't that boy in the alley. He was in control now. "You don't get it," Mateo said, eyes locked on the man. "No one owns me. I won't let you hurt anyone else. Try all you want, but I'm not yours anymore." For the first time, the man's expression faltered. Worry flickered in his eyes. But he didn't give up so easily. "Think you've won, huh? I'll be watching, Mateo. Always." And with that, he turned and walked out. Mateo stood frozen, emotions flooding through him. He was gone. But more importantly, Mateo had stood his ground. Saul looked at him, pride in his eyes. "You did well, Mateo. That's the strength you needed. And the first real step toward becoming who you're meant to be." Mateo glanced toward the door. Then back at Saul. A new confidence had taken root. He had faced his past. He had refused to back down. And though the road ahead would still be long, he knew now, he wasn't walking it alone. After the tense confrontation with the man from his past, Mateo felt as if a great weight had finally been lifted from his chest. The man's threats no longer held the same power. Mateo realized something deeper. He not only had Saul by his side, he had something even stronger. Inner strength. Something he hadn't known existed within him. The next morning, when he woke up, everything seemed normal. But something inside him had changed. It wasn't fear. It wasn't the shame he had once grown accustomed to. It was something far more powerful. Confidence and clarity. He had overcome a massive challenge. Now, he could face the next ones with strength. That afternoon, Saul called him into the office. Sunlight streamed through the windows, glinting off the smooth desk surfaces. Saul was seated at his large desk, serious, as always. But this time, when he looked at Mateo, there was undeniable pride in his eyes. "Mateo," Saul began, "I'm incredibly proud of what you've done. Only truly strong people can walk through what you've survived. But this is just the beginning. Are you ready to keep going?" Mateo met his gaze, a steady fire in his chest. "I'm ready, Mr. Saul. I know I can't go back. I'll keep moving forward." Saul smiled, nodding. "Good. Now we take the next important step." He stood, walking toward the window. "Mateo, what you've learned here is just a piece of life. There's so much more you need to explore. Today, I'm giving you a new challenge. But this time, it won't be just for yourself. It'll be for others. You'll start building real relationships. And from there, you'll begin to learn how to lead." Mateo blinked, surprised. "Lead? I never thought I was capable of that." Saul turned and looked at him, eyes unwavering. "You are. Leadership isn't about command. It's about listening, understanding, guiding people toward the right path. And Mateo, you've already learned the most important part. Facing your fears. Now it's time to help others do the same." Mateo was silent. He'd never imagined himself as a leader. But Saul's words stirred something in him. He wanted to test himself. To see how far he could go. "I understand," Mateo replied, his voice firm. "I'll do it." Saul placed a hand on his shoulder. "Exactly. Your next step is getting to know the people you'll lead. They're not strangers. They'll be people you connect with. People you'll grow with. A good team isn't built on talent alone. It's built on trust and understanding." The next day, Saul brought Mateo to an important meeting. It was his first time sitting at a table with industry leaders. The room was vast, filled with sharply dressed professionals and sharp-eyed decision-makers. As Mateo sat down, nerves crept in. But Saul smiled and gestured toward him. "Mateo will be part of this project. He has talents I believe you'll come to respect." Some in the room glanced at Mateo, eyebrows raised. A former street kid sitting here? But instead of shrinking, Mateo straightened his back. He wasn't here to be pitted. He was here to contribute. Throughout the meeting, he listened intently. Watching how they spoke, how they negotiated, how they used relationships to move projects forward. It wasn't just about money. It was about how they communicated, how they led. Later, Saul turned to the group and said, "Mateo brings a perspective we can all learn from." It caught Mateo off guard. He never thought he had something to offer here. But Saul had seen something in him. Something even Mateo hadn't seen yet. The next day, Mateo felt his life had entered a new chapter. After the meeting, Saul entrusted him with greater responsibilities. Managing small projects, beginning to build relationships with real partners. Mateo was no longer a spectator. He was part of the team. And he felt proud. Still, a question lingered deep inside. Was he truly ready for this? Life had taught him that nothing lasted forever. Everything he had could vanish. He'd lost so much before. He didn't want to fall again. Saul sensed this in his eyes. A few days later, he called Mateo into his office once more. There was tension again, but not out of fear. It came from the weight of what was next. "Mateo, you're doing well," Saul said, his voice calm but deep. "But I need to remind you of something important. Never lose yourself in this journey. Mateo frowned. I don't understand, Mr. Saul. I'm trying my best. Saul's gaze sharpened. Yes. And you're doing great. But challenges won't stop coming. You'll face difficult decisions, temptations. Moments that could pull you away from who you are. You must hold on to your core. Never forget why you started. Mateo sat quietly, thinking. He had worked hard. But he'd never stopped to ask why he was doing all of this. Was it just because Saul gave him a chance? Or was there a deeper reason? Something he had yet to discover? I won't forget, Mateo said at last, his voice grounded. I'll always remember why I had to change. Saul smiled, placing a hand on his shoulder. Good, Mateo. Keep that fire. Don't let the world put it out. After that talk, Mateo returned to work with a new perspective. He no longer just followed instructions. He understood the meaning of his decisions. He was working not just to survive, but to build a future. To lead. Not for glory, but with purpose. But the road wasn't smooth. The projects he took on brought real challenges. Partners doubted him. Some dismissed him for his youth. Not every decision he made was popular. Failure was real. But Mateo didn't break. He learned from it. One day, in a particularly tense meeting, a major partner challenged his proposal, openly criticizing his plan. Mateo felt shaken. But something in him shifted. Saul's words echoed in his head. This is where I prove myself, Mateo thought. Let's revisit the proposal, he said calmly. I believe there's a solution that works for both sides. But I also need you to understand. Change is necessary if we want to grow. This time, the room listened. They saw more than a young man. They saw a leader in the making. By the end of the meeting, his adjusted proposal was approved. As Mateo stepped out into the hallway, Saul was waiting. His eyes were lit with pride. You did great, Mateo. I'm proud of you. Mateo felt a wave of emotion rise. It wasn't just about the success. It was about becoming someone new. He wasn't a forgotten orphan anymore. He was a man shaping his own future. Mateo's life was no longer the same. With each small victory, he grew stronger, more confident. He no longer ran from challenges. He faced them head on. Every fall, every lesson, every word from Saul. It all shaped a new Mateo. But even with that growth, an emptiness remained. He had fought his past. He had rebuilt his future. But sometimes, he wondered if he was living, or just chasing expectations. One afternoon, he went for a walk. The city buzzed as always. But this time, he breathed it in differently. The same streets, the same corners. But he was not the same. He stopped at a small park. Children laughing, playing. It reminded him of a time when life was simpler. Those days were gone. And so was the boy he used to be. His phone rang. It was Saul. Mateo, I have an important mission for you. Saul said, voice serious. But first I need you to meet me right now. Nerves flickered in Mateo's chest. But fear no longer ruled him. He stood. He would meet Saul. Whatever waited ahead. He was ready. When he arrived, Saul was at his desk, as always stern, focused. Mateo, he began. I want you to take on a critical project. It won't be easy. But I believe you're ready. Saul's eyes bore into him. This project won't just impact the company. It could change your entire future. I want you to lead a new team. This will be the next big step in your career. Mateo's eyes widened. He had never expected this. But he also felt ready. What will I do? He asked, voice steady but unsure. Saul smiled. You'll lead. We're launching a major initiative. A project that could reshape the industry. You'll make decisions. You'll guide others. And you'll face serious tests. But I trust you. Mateo's heart pounded. This was the opportunity he had been working toward. He looked up, fire in his eyes. I'll do it, he said. I won't let you down. Saul nodded, eyes gleaming. I know you won't. This is your chance to step out of the shadows. The road will be hard. You'll face setbacks. But what matters is, you rise again. Mateo bowed his head slightly. Not from fear, but from understanding. He would not just lead for himself. He would lead for a greater future. This was a challenge he could not and would not refuse. The next day, Mateo began preparing for the new project. He had to meet with his team members, start outlining a strategy, and most importantly, learn how to become a true leader. There was still much he didn't know. But Mateo felt ready to face the challenge. He was no longer a wandering child with no direction. He had Saul by his side. And now, he had himself to rely on. The road ahead was filled with obstacles. But Mateo wasn't afraid. He had learned how to face his past. And now, it was time to build his future. A sense of freedom and confidence bloomed stronger within him. This was his time. To walk forward, to pursue the dream he had nurtured for so long. He knew every step he took would matter. And he would never give up. With renewed determination, Mateo dove into the task Saul had given him. The new project wasn't just a career opportunity. It was a test of self-worth. Over the following days, Mateo faced no shortage of challenges. As a young, first-time leader, he had to make difficult decisions, manage team conflicts, and find solutions to unexpected problems. But with the wisdom Saul had shared, and with his own persistence, Mateo pushed through. He was no longer simply following Saul's lead. He was the one leading, making decisions that would shape the project's success. Early mornings, late-night strategy sessions. Every experience was a lesson not found in any textbook. But with each small success, his confidence grew. One bright morning, as Mateo was reviewing final reports before the project launch, Saul called. Mateo, I need to see you right away. We need to talk about the next step. Mateo felt a flicker of excitement. When he arrived, Saul looked at him with a rare smile. You've done incredibly well. This project was a greater success than I imagined. And now, the road ahead is wide open. It's time for you to truly begin your own journey. Mateo stood still, his heart racing. Saul's words felt like a seal of acknowledgement. But they also hinted at a big turning point. What if I continue the project, on my own? Mateo asked, eyes steady. I want to build something of my own. Lead in my own way. Not live in your shadow. Saul didn't look surprised. He had seen this growth coming. Mateo, I've been waiting for this moment. You're free to do whatever you believe in. Just remember, the path won't be easy. You've proven yourself. Trust that. And know I'll always be here if you need me. A wave of freedom surged in Mateo's chest. He wasn't a child searching for rescue anymore. He had the knowledge, the strength, and the vision to walk forward on his own. After that decision, Mateo began a new chapter in his life. He was no longer following Saul's blueprint. He was running his own company, designing business strategies, building partnerships, and creating a team from the ground up. Every day brought new challenges, but he met them head on. Because for the first time, he was in control of his life. To shape his future, to impact others, and to live with purpose. Through tireless effort, Mateo built a thriving company. But more than that, he became a symbol of resilience. A reminder that no matter where you begin, your choices can rewrite your fate. One day, after his company had firmly established itself, Mateo returned to a small park. The one where, years ago, he once paused in silence. The park hadn't changed, but he had. He stood there, watching children laugh and run, his heart at peace. He thought of the boy he used to be. Hungry, scared, invisible. But now, everything was different. He had found true freedom. Not from the world outside, but from within. With everything he had endured, Mateo knew life is never easy. But with belief and persistence, anything is possible. His story, from a street orphan to a successful leader, proved one eternal truth. Change begins from within. And no matter how hard the road may seem, every path leads to light if you dare to take the first step. Thank you for joining us. We'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and share. What did this story teach you? How might it shape the way you live or forgive? Your voice matters. Reading your reflections brings strength, healing, and inspiration to us all. If this story touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps us create more stories that awaken the soul. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.